Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. Call-in number is 866-582-9933. If you plan on calling in, please make your topic germane to the discussion. Telephone listen line is up, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Hour number one is with Rich Scheben. Very interesting topics today. I don't normally say that, but it's true. And hour number two, Dr. Sam Milham. And we're going to be talking about electromagnetic radiation like you've never heard before. I guarantee it. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. Happy TGIF to you and our listeners. How are you doing this morning?
Very, very well. Rich, thanks for joining us and spending your time in the class today. I wanted to share something with you that I heard on the radio yesterday. Now, normally I don't do this. Normally I do not listen to the radio. But for some mistaken reason, I was tuning across the FM dial low and on the band, and I found National Public Radio. And I was listening to this program, and National Public Radio does something I actually like. They do slow descriptions, long descriptions. It's not point counterpoint fighting, quick hits and jabs, and so it's for people who actually maybe think a little bit differently from what we do. But I think they are probably a little brighter than the average radio listener. Not as bright as USA Prepare students, of course. But so they were talking about something that caught my attention. And there was a young couple on the air, a wife of a young couple, and they were talking about how difficult it is to have children. Not because of any reason other than financial. And they talked about something called child care. Sometimes it was called daycare, but no, not this time. It's called child care. And child care, as they were talking about, is really not so much child care. It was a school. So if you have children, infants and toddlers, now toddlers are like 2 years old, right? Infants are like brand new. If you have one of those or a couple of those, you can send them to the school in St. Louis. You can send your infant to a school, and it costs $18,000 a year to send your child to this school. The expenses, as described by the mother, young mother, consumed 14% of their gross income. So 14% of their gross income is $18,000 for one child. She said that expense is bigger than their mortgage payment and bigger than their student loan payment. So I just did a quick calculation. I said, okay, so what would that be? So the gross income has to be about, within a couple $100 of $130,000. So their gross income, let me say this a different way, $130,000. Child care expenses are $18,000. So assuming that the mortgage and the student loans are less than the child care, I just picked a number of $15,000 each. So now we have student loan 15, mortgage 15, child care 18, grand total $48,000. They were saying that they needed, it's difficult, to have a third child because of the child care expenses. They really need help. I think that would be from you and me and our class. People who actually earn money and pay taxes, those kinds of people. So they're looking for help because they can't have a third child on $130,000 gross income. How is that possible? Now, they explain that they don't have car payments because their cars are 15 years old. That makes them 2004 models. So they each have a car, it's fully paid for. $130,000, they can't make a go of having a third child. Now, I have to tell you, I don't get it. Number one, why would anybody in their right mind have children and then farm out those children to whether you call it a school or whether you call it a nursery or whether you call it daycare? Why would anybody do that and not raise their own children? Now, Mrs. Finelli and I, when we decided to have children, we both had jobs. And who made the most? Well, it depends on who got the last raise. If I got the last raise, I was making a little bit more. If she got the last raise, she would make a little bit more. So when we decided to have children and she became a certified housewife and mother rather than, a working young person with a degree, our income went to half. And that was okay because we knew this was coming. We planned for it. We saved for it. And we trimmed expenses even lower than we trimmed them before. But we saved for it before we had children. We didn't go out on buying binges. Now, we did buy a brand new, well, not to us, it was brand new. It was a house built in 1945. We put, I think, between 25 and 30% down, maybe 33% down on it, because we saved money. We delayed getting married until we were 27. And my requirements were that we would wait until we got married until we each had $10,000 in the bank, each had a good job, and each had our master's degree and owned our own cars outright. And we did all those things. Then we got married and we saved some more money, bought a house, made double, triple, quadruple payments on the mortgage to pay it off faster. Then we had children. We weren't behind the eight ball. Rich, do you have any comments about, well, geez, $130,000 isn't going to do it today?
Well, we have to remember that the bailouts pretty much go to the rich. I mean, the Government Accountability Office found $16 trillion of federal loans that went to any bank, domestic or foreign, that was going bankrupt. These loans started in 2007 and went through 2010. So remember the 2008 collapse, folks? It didn't even get fixed. It basically went to the wealthiest of the wealthiest, and the little people didn't get bailed out. So we have to remember that the whole system is skewed where the little people has to pay for the cost shifting of fraud and malinvestments from the elite. And this is one of the reasons, the biggest reason why we have unsustainable headwinds for future rates of growth. So you look at the debt situation we have, global, household, and especially corporate, never mind government promises for all these pensions and valuations and the credit issues we have, the demographics. We have to plan because you got to look at the aging demographics. You got to look at the young people not having kids. You got to look at the reduction in demand. Prices are being lowered in some instances, except for products that are of need, and they're being subsidized, so little people has to pay more for that. There's a drop in wages, the wages that really matter. There's a drop in spending. Velocity of money is going down. People are postponing buying a little bit. And I think everybody sees that they don't want to spend as much because we have a recession, depression looming because President Trump inherited a disaster. So with increased debt, decreased savings and credit, and money supply being very ambiguous and not going to the people, and QE is just one example, we as little people have to plan. we have to live below our means and know the fine line between needs and wants. And if we know what we need versus what we want, I think we would all be a lot better off. But we also have to dovetail that with self-sufficiency. Could be growing your own food, could be raising animals. It could be, why buy food that doesn't have nutrition? And most Americans do that because 90% live in urban, suburban America. So they buy a pretty vegetable, they think it's got nutrition. It's usually full of chemicals, and most of the soil those vegetables come from don't even have nutrition. And that's, people need to realize that nutrition comes from the soil. So we can go on and on and on with this, Vince. We have to be in a planning situation because central banks and Keynesian economics has put the burden on the little people. Pretty much all the money, all the so-called real wealth exchange has gone to the wealthy. And, you know, this when in doubt, print, inflate, buy now, pay later, believing that you can create a better economy by increasing the money supply is going to come back and haunt us. So deficits do matter. Debt does matter. And we need to start thinking outside the box. And I think the best education is if people, and I've talked about this so many times on multiple shows, I would love to see teachers have to have minimum 15 years of private sector successful experience. I would love to see public forums and citizen review boards everywhere. I would love to see people who have been there, done that, going into schools and be speakers. I mean, today's kids don't even know how to balance their checkbook when they graduate. They don't know the difference between principal and interest. They don't know what equity means. They don't know so many things, and they're missing out on time leverage on their assets. So basically, it's pretty obvious that it's an aristocracy-serfdom relationship, and the inequality of the two are getting farther and farther apart every day. And that's one of the reasons I talk about taking advantage of lower bond yields so the little people can refinance. If we go down to zero, even go down into negatives. I hope the White House has listened to some of my talks on this. Let's give a light at the end of the tunnel program to the little people who has no light at the end of the tunnel. That's why despair is growing so rapidly in America. And we can actually pay people, if we go down to negative 3% interest rates, especially on the long end, the 10 to the 30, we can actually give people back 3% of their money if they pay, instead of bailing out all the rich people that we've done for years and had our aristocracy funding both sides of the war so they can have more power, money, and control at the end of it. Why don't we help give a little QE to the people in an outside-the-box fashion? And that's what people are doing today, Vince. They're buying things without thinking of the future and not doing the math.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking that this young couple probably doesn't know how to do anything. Faucet trips, they have to call somebody. Car won't start, they have to call somebody. You know, those kinds of things. And so they're paying for a lot of things that they can learn how to do. We'll be right back. Class, here's a point of order. When I was at the university, I had some pretty good professors. They taught me some things that I thought were just worth knowing. And one of them I'd like to share with you this morning. One of my professors said, you know, professors really don't like it when a student raises his hand or the student shouts out, "You said." Professor would and sometimes the student misquotes what the professor was saying or the intent of what the professor was saying. And so what the professor said we should do in order to be polite is say something like this. I believe I heard you say, or did you say, the following. So that's what I try to do here at USA Prepares. And I'm going to give you an example of it right now. Rich Scheben, I believe I heard you say something like teachers should have 15 years experience before they go into the classroom. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I think we need to teach practical life experience instead of subjective emotional opinion that comes from textbooks that's written by somebody else to basically sell a curriculum which is mostly social and political doctrination. We need to teach real objective facts and information so kids can better their lives and not be told what to do, what to say, and how to think.
And regurgitate. And the reason I mentioned that was when I heard you say that, I quickly calculated how many years of experience I had prior to teaching school. 17 years of real experience, design, development, corporate world experience, entrepreneurship experience, in the inventing world. All of those kinds of experiences, 17 years worth before I started. I absolutely positively have to agree with you. And the other teachers really despised me because I seemed to be coming from a different world from what they were used to. I had no classroom experience learning how to teach. None. Zero. I was a non-certified teacher, meaning I didn't go to school to learn how to teach. I went to school to learn how to do things. And they made an exception for me. The school board made an exception for 3 years so that I could be a teacher who was not certified to teach. And I taught a completely different way. Because I didn't get taught how to teach, I made it up. I didn't ask for permission. I just did it. So, for example, I asked the students if they wanted to be graded from starting with a 100 points, and all they had to do was keep it, or if they wanted to start from 0 and work their way up to 100, if that's what they wanted to do. Never before had that been done in that particular school district. It's always the way we always do it, which is you start with 0 and you keep building based on regurgitation and tests and scores and homework and so forth. And my students wanted to do it the other way. They wanted to start out with 100. So day one, everybody had an A. Everybody. But I did have a 2/3 dropout rate. And that was great. Because what the students found out was that it wasn't as easy as they thought it was going to be. They thought it was just going to be like basket weaving. And it wasn't. So I'm very concerned about this one particular example that I mentioned when we first started, that a young family thinks that we should be providing for them so that they can have the number of children that they want. It's up to us. And then they interviewed we'll call him the CEO or the manager or the administrator of this school. And he said, it's really difficult to attract quality teachers when we only pay them $10.50 an hour. That's an approximation. It's within a couple pennies. $10.50 an hour. That's like minimum wage. So are they really teachers or are they really babysitters? So they go out on fundraisers to raise more money. We'll be right back. Class, Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com, offgridmontana.com. And you can buy his book, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. It's available at Amazon if you choose to go there. I have the book. I've read the book several times. It's got yellow highlighter all over it. Quite fascinating. And if you think that you'd like to pursue an off-grid lifestyle, it's in the book. I think you'll find it an easy read. It's paperback. It's well done. Rich, we're talking about this daycare, or childcare, I should say. $347 a week. They pay their teachers about $10.50 an hour. They say that they can't pay them more. The institute, or the institution, I should say, that offers this education, which I find a stretch for an infant. They say they educate them. They say a critical, very, very important thing is love. And the child needs love. I believe that. I really do. And so, because I believe that, why would anybody in his or her right mind want to farm out the raising of their child or children to somebody they hardly know? Why? Why would they do that? Why not have mom stop working, have less money, but be able to pull that off because, well, they've planned for it. They've planned, and they made a deliberate sacrifice before the child and a deliberate sacrifice after the child, and then mom can nurture that child. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I have a feeling that because we have farmed out our children to minimum wage or less people, that we have some of the problems that we have with the millennials today.
Well, I'll tell you, Vince, we have, you never know where that money for those schools are coming from. And when you don't know where the money is coming from, you don't know what the curriculum has to be set as. And we cannot, the big problem with teaching today is we're teaching theory and not teaching practical experience. And this is what happens when you hire somebody right out of school or college to be a teacher. You're indoctrinating the teacher into the curriculum of the powers that be and not preparing the kids for a real life. And let me just give you one example. Our military. I'm reading lately that up to 70%, that's 70, of our young adults can't qualify because of health reasons, like they're out of shape, physical reasons, they can't run. Intellectually or academia-wise, they just don't qualify with proven results. So when you look at certain barometers of what teachers are pushing out, and of course you got to go home also to their home because the divorce rate is so high in America. And what happens when the father's being kicked out of the home? There's no responsibility. You just lose. When you don't have the partnerships of a man and woman, and then the state becomes the daddy, you have less accountability and more excuse behaviors. And that's what we're running into today. And this is why, the powers that be want to manufacture division and hate between every group, from skin pigmentation to genders to sexual orientation, etc. Because the powers that be, these so-called Democrat liberals that control the media and everything else, which are mostly white, by the way, they need to foment this hate and division. They need to be professional pot stirrers because they got to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people because they don't want to lose what they have. And at the same time, they're not practicing what they preach. Just like Barbara Streisand flying 10,000 miles to watch her dog sing. These are the same people who are calling for global warming and carbon tax. And I'll tell you something, if the way things are looking, and as you know, folks, we always stick up for the little guy, the bottom 93% of income earners. Oil is supposed to shoot through the moon. And if oil goes to the moon, so does prosperity for the bottom 93%, because so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, especially in a situation where the average household has a $3,000 deficit from debt, and debt is deflationary by nature. The banks are going broke. Credit card charges are highest they've ever been, and we're going to be basically the pension funds and the government bailouts are going to be burdened onto the taxpayer. So we need to start, all of us in the bottom 93%, living below our means and knowing what a need and a want actually is. because the whole system is corrupt, manipulated, and skewed so the elite can keep what they have. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so big on interest rates going down, especially at the long end, so everybody can refinance. Because if interest rates go up, we can't even afford to pay the interest on our debt. I have it somewhere on my desktop here. I have an article where they're talking about, here it is right here, endgame. Starting in 2024, all U.S. debt issuance will be used to pay only for interest on the debt. Just interest on the debt. That's it. So there's no way we're going to even touch principal at that point. And I think this is why President Trump is trying very hard to get out of the central bank SWIFT corrupt system and think of something new. So we all have to start thinking outside the box, because we're going to have a transition. I hate the terms revaluation or reset, but something of that nature is going to happen. So we have to realize that if we don't keep interest rates down, the little guy, stocks, bonds, housing, especially commercial and real estate, never mind interest in our debt, emerging markets, everything is going to go south, because the little guy is already in a deficit. And we are in a stagflationary, deflationary environment. Pretty soon, when all this money abroad, which is 2-3 times the amount of money that's here domestically, is going to come back to the United States, it's going to create inflation. They're going to do more QE, which is going to create inflation. They're going to do stimulus on many different aspects, which is going to create inflation. And then we're going to go from a deflationary, stagflation environment to an inflationary, stagflationary environment. You got to remember, the economy is only good for the top 7%. All these unit of measures can be tweaked with new calculations, new unit of measure styles, just like consumer confidence is very subjective. The stock market highs, well, the reason why the stock market's high is because of stock buybacks. And we've talked about in great detail, on how it's been basically QE, or pardon me, welfare for the rich. It's been done because of things like stock buybacks and things like QE and things like fractional reserve lending. We've talked about that in great detail. So we have to look at GDP. How can you look at GDP as a measure when $4 of debt is needed for $1 of growth? That's not a legitimate unit of measure. Wages are mixed. Inflation, we've talked about this in great detail with the cost shifting from the inflation chart that I like to use on a regular basis. And basically the inflation chart that was on Zero Hedge just a few months ago talked about, and I'm just going to mention the highlights. Basically, there were 6 things, and I can consolidate it into 3 categories, where they talk about school costs, college costs, healthcare costs, and car insurance. And basically, it's all cost shifting, especially from illegal immigration. So as the people pay for all illegal immigrants to come into the emergency room with no consequences, where we can't even afford to go, or they don't pay their own car insurance, we have to pay for the cost shifting. Same with college in many different instances, from books to tuition. We've gotten to the point that the whole system is a Cloward and Piven system, dovetailed with Alinsky and Marx and the Frankfurt School. Every strategy that is being done right now is in print, and it's been in print for a very long time. So what do we? This is why I talk about refinancing at low rates. So if we can get down into zero, especially on the long end, get down into the negatives, I would love to see a light at the end of the tunnel program in the form of some type of bailout or help for the little guy, because the little guy never gets any help. I mean, just stock buybacks alone, they've put money not into expansion or new products or services or new employees. They've put money into new debt for shares buybacks, dividends to the top 10 wealthiest shareholders, And then acquisitions and merger just means more consolidation, which means more robotics, automation, artificial intelligence. Nothing, no policy, from Keynesian economics to group identity politics, nothing is benefiting the little people. It's all to take money from the little people to give to the big people in the form of money printing, subsidies, special interest, lobbying, and PACs. We have no representation at any level. And we don't even know what to say to the little guy. Do you put money in? What if we lose the world reserve currency next week? Very possible. What are we going to have, an international and a domestic dollar? Or how about an IMF or Bank of International Settlement monitoring some crooked special drawing right SDR? Are we going to have gold, silver? Is it going to mean anything? Well, how is the system even remotely legitimate when silver's should be a 16-to-1 ratio? It's like 90-to-1 to gold. If it's legitimate, why do we still have paper gold and naked shorts? How come Bill Clinton stole $2 trillion from Social Security and put in IOUs, and they're talking about solvency and liquidity issues for Social Security and pension funds when the little people never even gets a bailout? So this is why I'm such a big proponent of means testing. If we go to negative interest rates or zero, instead of funding both sides of wars and NGOs and geoengineering and making people sick, let's put money into helping out some of the little people. Let's extend, and when I talk about the long end of the yield curve, that's synonymous to saying let's take those debts that everybody has and make it not just less in interest to pay off, if not no interest. Let's make that payoff schedule longer. And in the meantime, we dismantle debt-based currency, central banks, eliminate the Fed. We have to audit the Fed first. If we did these stuff, our economy would flourish. But the powers that be do not want prosperity for us. We'll be right back, folks.
Yeah, imagine the prosperity we had back in the 1950s and the 1960s. We were really on a roll. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, I was thinking back to the 1980s. The city of Baltimore was in such a state of disrepair. Potholes were everywhere. People were complaining, and the city didn't have enough money to fill the potholes. I am not exaggerating. So what the mayor did, he was very clever. He developed a program which allowed you to buy a pothole. Literally, if you sent a payment of $20 or $25 into the city, they would give you your own pothole. I'm not exaggerating. You could own that pothole, and what they would do is they would take a picture of it with a Polaroid camera, and your $25 or $20 donation would pay for the repair of that pothole, and it'd be yours. What they would do is send you the picture of that pothole. Now, you couldn't pick your own pothole, but what happened was the pothole repair crew, the guys who would drive around with that warm asphalt in the back of a truck, would take that Polaroid camera, take a picture of the pothole, and they would print it out right then and there. And at the end of the day, they would bring them to the City Hall, and they would be sent out to the people who sent in their $20 or $25. I kid you not. So I think we should move to Baltimore. What do you think, Rich Sheben?
Well, I'm going to answer that in just a few articles here. Baltimore teens arrested for armed robbery of mom holding 5-week-old son in her arms. PBS aired film documentary last year about Baltimore's rodent problem. Next article. Last week, police deputy commissioner robbed at gunpoint. Next article. A Baltimore mayor who put up the Confederate statues was Pelosi's father. Just a little tidbit of trivia there. Next article. Trump, $16 billion, billion with a B, went to Baltimore, was stolen or wasted, asked Elijah Cummings where it went. I read one article where it was a sting operation, that they're going to show how the powers that be in Baltimore feathered their nest and their friend's nest through malinvestment. So, we have, and this is why I'm always, and I only have a couple minutes here, Vince, so let me just mention a few other articles. And if we had to title this, it would be, Are the Little People Being Represented? Okay, next article. The bigger the farm, the bigger the government paycheck bailout goes to the richest farmers. Next article. Endgame. Okay, I talked about that, where in 2024 we're not going to be able to pay even principal on our debt. Next article. Now compared to the last time the U.S. entered a recession, it couldn't be worse. Don't have time to go through all the parameters. Everything from PMI, manufacturing, everything is way worse than before the 2008 crash. Next article. It's a scam. Rich Chicago parents giving up custody of kids to exploit financial aid loophole. You can't make this stuff up. Next article. Lowe's lays off thousands of store workers. The little guy. Next article. Fear of earnings recession keeps investors away from stocks. People are pouring into buying bonds. That means, remember, bonds work inversely. Don't forget, price goes up, the yield goes down. That's what's happening, which is a good thing, I think, even though the powers that be are bitching and moaning. Next article. Ethics complaint filed against Republican Ilhan Omar, accused of immigration, tax, and student loan fraud. She's the congresswoman from Minnesota who says that Latinos cannot compete in a merit system. So basically, if you're in Congress, if you're one of the wealthy elite, you're going to get bailed out. That's what this is saying. So to answer your question, in Baltimore, I think I did with those 5 articles, we've gotten to the point where we have no representation, the little guy. It doesn't matter what skin color you are, what gender. We are being used and poisoned against ourselves by the elite. We need to get our head out of our butts and realize that it's a lot less left-right paradigm and a lot more aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. Vincent?
Okay, so here's one more article. Representative Elijah Cummings, his Baltimore home was burglarized last Saturday. His home was burglarized last Saturday. I'm looking at images of the roofs of the we'll call them row houses or townhouses in Baltimore. I'm talking about 3-story brick buildings, and about half of them have black roofs. Half. Maybe 40%, 45% have silver-colored roofs, and maybe the rest have white-colored roofs. Now, these are just tar roofs. It's just one more example of what's wrong. Black absorbs heat. So it costs more to cool the house if you have a black roof. Why, in heaven's name, aren't all the roofs painted with this reflective silver or white? That's just one question I have. Why? Next question. How is it possible that a representative's home was burglarized in a city that's not, well, I guess Baltimore people think that it's great. It's not great. Just like in the 1980s with the potholes. The city could not afford to fix their own potholes. And they have plenty of taxes. It's not like taxes aren't being paid. They are being paid. We're talking about mismanagement at the highest levels. It's replete throughout the system. Rich Scheben, thanks so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Vince. Thank you.
Everyone all set? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us. Today I'm delighted to be broadcasting with Dr. Sam Milham, MD, MPH, medical doctor, master's in public health. I'm going to spell his last name for you, Milham. He wrote a book, and the book is available on Amazon. It's called Dirty Electricity: Electrification and Diseases of Civilization. Class, as I understand it, we're going to be talking about electromagnetic radiation from a practical direction. And from what I understand, much of what's happened to us with electricity is a result of a war among Thomas Alva Edison. He was a proponent of direct current, DC. And Nikola Tesla, he was a proponent of alternating current, AC. And George Westinghouse, He was a proponent of alternating current. Direct current flows in one direction from negative to positive. It's often thought it flows the other way around, but it doesn't. And alternating current oscillates, going back and forth between the load and the source of the current. Direct current is safer, but it's difficult to move that direct current along long transmission lines. AC is more efficient. It travels easier, and that's because of the ease of inserting transformers that will increase the voltage along the way. So how high voltage lines, what kind of voltage? 345,000 volts, those big high voltage transmission lines. Local power is down to 13,800 volts, and then further reduced to what you see in your home, which would be 240/120. Welcome, Dr. Milham.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning. So what I said to introduce today's discussion, was that accurate?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. So when you and I talked over the phone just prior, last few days, we talked about dirty electricity, how dangerous it is, and why we have this problem. And you hit the nail right on the head, and I haven't heard anybody else say this. And that is that what we do in the United States and Canada, North America, if you will, is we send one part of the electric line in our home to ground. And if you look at our outlets, you'll see that there's two prongs in a receptacle, for a receptacle, that are for AC, and then one is for ground. So but at our electrical panels, we literally connect one side of AC, alternating current, to ground all the time. Can you tell us why that is such a big problem?
Well, it wasn't a problem when it was set up initially, because there was enough wire between the load, the house or the business, and the substation where the stuff came from. But now the utilities, instead of spending money on return wires, are just dumping the stuff in the ground, and it goes very well in the ground, amazingly well. I mean, I've been on Cascade Crest trails here on the West Coast, and miles from any power line or any person, and you can pick up the electricity that's running back to the substation up in this wilderness area. So the stuff's everywhere. Now, we've got a grounded wire distribution system in North and South America, and that's the way the system's built. Now, in Europe, they've got a delta system where all the return currents go back in the wire, so they don't have this ground current problem. Now, I've noticed in the years I've been doing this business, probably 25 years, that the ground currents are going up. They were 1 or 2 volts, and now a lot of places are over 10 volts, going back to the substation. So
Dr. Milham, there's the old story about dancing cows. And what that means is that cows have been on fields and they will raise their hooves over and over and over again as if they stepped on something that they didn't like. And what we found out that there was electricity in the ground that was electrocuting them. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah. I work with Dave Stutzer. He's an electrician in Wisconsin. And he's got videos. I've seen videos of the dancing cows.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How dangerous is the way, and let me just try to describe this, and please correct me if you feel that I'm wrong. Coming into our house, we'll find that there are 3 wires. And one of them we'll call red, the other we'll call black, and the other we'll call the ground, or the neutral, or the ground/neutral/common. And that ground wire is attached to a ground rod at our home. Now, in our breaker panel, we have the red, the black, which are AC, and then we have the common, the neutral / ground. If we want 120 volts, we'll use the red side and the common or the ground or the neutral, whichever you want to call it. If we want more AC at 120 volts, we'll use the black, and we'll call it the common. We'll just refer to it as common or the ground. So we can have 120 volts split from the 240 volts that comes in. But it is always, always, always grounded, because in order to meet the National Electric Code, it must be grounded, right?
Right.
Okay. So how much of our electricity is going into the ground at each one of our homes? Do you have a feel for that?
Yeah, well, it's going up. I think that about, I think it's probably up to 70% plus now of the return currents to the substation are going through the earth instead of through the wires. And the first people to notice this were the dairy farmers. The current in the ground not only made the cows dance, it affected their milk production, and that's the money of the dairy business. And well, I mean, it's killed thousands of cows, probably hundreds of thousands of cows over the years. Not only just got the milk production down, but they get all sorts of diseases, and when they're not producing milk, they get killed.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Milham and class, I am a cattle farmer. That's what I do. I raise cows right here in Missouri. So I'm very sensitive to these kinds of issues. I also know that if you take two rods and you drive them into the ground, two metal rods, and you take a voltmeter, a very sensitive voltmeter, you will be able to measure current between those two rods, let's say 20 feet apart. Have you done that, Dr.
Oh,
Milham?
yeah. That's every time we make measurements, we have a ground reference. So, you know, my oscilloscope, like I've been measuring current in water, you know, because it's electrocuting people, too. That's another bad outcome from our utility practice of using the earth as a ground. It runs through the water. I mean, salt water is fine, but fresh water, I mean, there's probably dozens of deaths every year in this country from people being electrocuted when they, you know, go swimming in fresh water.
We live in Missouri, as I mentioned, and Lake of the Ozarks is an area a couple hours away. And if you drive down some of the major roads through Lake of the Ozarks, you'll see signs on billboards that actually warn you about swimming in the water with electricity being present in the water, and you can die. Exactly what you're saying. You can die swimming in fresh water in Missouri. There are docks. There's carelessness. Now, it's not natural. We put it there. We put this electricity there in the water through our own carelessness. Improperly wiring, improperly shielding, just improper connections, exposed connections, and so forth. Dr. Milham, do you see a way that we can fix this problem?
Yeah, when the grid was built originally, enough wires were run between the house and the substation to carry all the return currents. And in fact, every state has got a law on the books, which is not enforced, of course, that says you can't put the stuff in the ground. But they do. I mean, it's getting worse all the time. It saves them money. They don't have to buy wires or have people go out and put them up. But I've seen it happen where a dairy farm, all of a sudden the milk production goes way down, and they get Dave Stetzer to come in and make a measurement. He shows that it's due to ground current, and if they're sued or threatened, they could come out and put wires in to do the job that they used to do, and until the cows give milk again, the current goes down.
I used to manufacture computers, and we had a customer, a very large operation, one of the largest cigarette manufacturers in the world, and I'm not advocating smoking in any way, shape, or form. But what happened was we built computers, built a network, installed the network, and it would be blown up, a couple times a month. And no matter what we did, we could not solve it. The surge protection, no matter what we did, uninterruptible power, they kept, these computers on this network kept getting blown up. And what we found out was that the meter, the electric meter, was improperly wired, and that allowed for any time there was static electricity in the air, like lightning, boom, it would blow this network. So I think, and this is a rural electric cooperative, where, I think maybe some shortcuts are taken that maybe shouldn't be. Supervision isn't maybe as great as it should be. And I believe that's why we had some of these problems. But once we fixed the wiring at the meter, then the network stayed up and running and didn't get blown up. Do you see carelessness as a problem, or is this design as a problem?
Oh, it's probably both. I don't know which is more important. But talking about the meters, I had a terrible problem with the smart meter put on my house. The old meter had a rotating electric disc. It's just a motor, and every turn measured how much electricity you used. Had little meters that were geared to it. It was a real simple thing. It worked for 30, 40 years. No problem, no mistakes. And then they replaced it with this electronic gizmo, which will we going someplace?
Yeah, we're going into a break. We're on for another 40 minutes, but this is our first break, and Dr. Milham and I will be right back after these few short commercial announcements. Please don't touch that dial. Dr. Sam Milham is with us. Website, SAMMILHAM.com. You were talking about smart meters, Dr. Milham. Please continue. You had an old one? Worked fine?
I had an old one, and one day a couple guys show up with the new one, and I couldn't talk them out of it. And so they put the stupid thing on, and boy, from then on I couldn't sleep because it was on my bedroom wall. So I got some shielding material and put it up, and it worked fairly well, but my sleep was still disturbed. And finally, after a long time, they had an opt-out program in Washington State where I live, and when they put the old meter on, it wasn't the same meter, but the same sort of meter with the rotating disc. Oh man, what a difference! I mean, I just could feel it. I slept well ever since. We were talking about ground current. It's in the ground, and it's everywhere in North America, South America, and Canada. I've measured it in the West Coast from Canada all the way down to Mexico. And it's always the same. You find it everywhere. I can't find a place that's clean with no ground current. Well, you know what? I think it's killing salamanders. There's a big death worldwide of those animals. And from in the U.S. anyway, for sure. I read a paper of some woman studied them up in Yellowstone or one of the national parks, and there's ground current there. And I wrote her about it. She never responded. Excuse me.
That's too bad that she never responded. But I remember when I was a youngster, salamanders were everywhere. Literally. Yeah. I haven't seen one in 20 years, maybe 30 years. Literally. I've not seen one.
There's all sorts of, and many of those species are gone. There's those pretty golden frogs, the poisonous ones down south. I think they're all gone. Down in South America, Central America, they're no longer with us. And I think they have a few of them in some sort of shelter, but they got to watch out the shelter because they're getting exposed there too.
You mentioned smart meters, and several years ago, it wasn't two guys. I guess they weren't quite as afraid, so they only sent one guy in a pickup truck, and he had the whole bed lined with smart meters. He showed up, and I said, so what's up? And he said, I'm going to change your meter. I said, no, I'm okay. I like the one I've got. And he said, no, I'm going to put this new meter in. I said, I don't want it. And he said, and it kind of escalated, our tone escalated, and he said he was going to do it, and I said, no, he wasn't. And he told me he was going to call the sheriff and have me arrested if I didn't get out of his way. So as a result of that, I decided that I would run for the board of directors of the Laclede Electric Cooperative because I want these smart meters out of here. There is no opting out. You will have a smart meter or you will not have electricity. Now, just getting one smart meter out is nice, but if you live in an urban environment or in an apartment complex, you're surrounded with, everybody's got a smart meter. So even if you get yours removed, there's still like 40 of them that are blasting you, right? Isn't that true?
Right, for sure.
And it's cumulative and it's additive, the effects of electromagnetic.
Another problem with the ground current problem, and those smart meters add to it too, is places like I lived in winter times in California. I moved back a couple of years ago to Washington State full time. But down there, almost all the houses are built on concrete slabs with rebar, steel rods for support when they pour the concrete. Well, your house is built on that, and you got water lines and other conductors attached to your house, to your slab. Every part of the house that's metal or conductive that's attached to the slab is going to expose you. I mean, I went around my house and measured. I've got the meters on how to measure the stuff, and boy, I was getting power current. You get a 60 hertz sine wave, on my metal doors and on the floor. So I went for rugs and shoes right away, and my dog died from it. I'm sure he did because he liked to sleep in the bathroom floor, which was cool. And we got another commercial coming.
Yeah, there's no shortage of commercials on the radio, and we're going to be right back with Dr. Milham. We'll be right back. Class, Dr. Sam Milham is with us, and we're talking about dirty electricity. You can find his book on Amazon.com, Dirty Electricity. And you've mentioned, I believe, Dr. Milham, about concrete slabs. And, for those who don't have a concrete slab, do you have a basement?
Yeah,
do you have a concrete porch? Yeah. Do you have concrete steps or shower base? How about a cast iron or steel tub that is connected to a brass drain pipe, which it's connected to a metal drain pipe or plastic? So there are plenty of opportunities for you to have electricity coming into your home. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I had a woman in California who got sick every time she took a shower. I measured her place, and she was getting zapped in the shower from the ground current coming into her house. Notice when she was, touching the shower fixture, she was getting radiated. And
so what do we do?
Well, what you do is you take short showers, or you move. I moved back up north, where my house, the whole house is up on concrete, on wood posts, and I'm in the bay. I got a crawl space underneath with wood posts, and I've got insulation between the post and the earth, so I don't get any ground current in this house. And but down in California, I couldn't avoid it. I mean, it was just everywhere. And and this has happened since Edison. He started his grid in 1892, I think it was, and since then everybody's been getting exposed because he had problem with his generators. He had 9-peak generators at his Pearl Street station. I read all his early stuff. It's really fascinating, and they recognized they had a brush arcing problem, and his generators that was making dirty electricity, which is adding some to the grid besides what you wanted, and he tried to get rid of it by dumping mercury into his generators, but it made the workers sick. So that didn't work. But anyway, we've had ground current ever since Edison, and we've had dirty electricity ever since he started it. And I got one paper I'm really proud of. It's nobody reads it, of course, but all my papers are, or most of the electrical papers are on my website, which is just sam.milham. You can get it just by putting dirty electricity into your Google search, and it'll come up. The farms in this country didn't get electrified until 1955. Every big city had electricity by the turn of the century. So there are two big populations in this country, urban and rural, that had differences in being hooked to the grid. And if you look at back in the 30s and 40s, 20s, when the farms didn't have it, the cities did, you find enormous differences in mortality between urban and rural areas. In fact, the worst difference was for diabetes, deaths, fatal diabetes, 60% higher in the electrified areas. And it's all the cancers, everything else was higher, except for auto accidents. That was the same in urban and rural areas. So that really told me that, hey, this is an all sorts, it's an all causes problem, and it's due to this our fascination with electricity. I don't want to do without electricity, but we got to do it better. We got to use DC from solar, and solar's another problem because if you invert it, you change it to AC to tie to the grid. The inverter, of course, adds dirty electricity to your house, your home, and so it's buzzing you when it's making electricity.
So for someone who has a solar system, Dr. Milham, what do you recommend they do? Do you suggest?
I mean, shut it off, or you can buy some Stetzer filters that you can plug into your outlets to get rid of some of the stuff it makes, not all of it. But that does help.
Tell us about the Stetzer filters. What do they do?
Well, they're capacitors, and they just basically short out the non-60 cycle stuff. And I mean, they're warm, and I've got them in my house, and I've put them in places and seen just dramatic differences in health and well-being. I mean,
so are you talking about electrolytic type capacitors?
Yeah, electrolytic problems. Yeah, I mean, how our kids are misbehaving, or that's why school teachers have got a high cancer rate, and because the schools are electrically dirty. Fluorescent lights are another big source of bad stuff, and LED lights. Anything but go ahead.
Let's talk about a classroom. So we've got a teacher in a classroom. There are a whole bunch of computers in there. There's fluorescent lights in there.
Yeah.
They probably have some microwave transmission equipment outside the school building. They have surveillance systems everywhere. They have access points in the hallways and in the classrooms. Are you saying that all of that electromagnetic radiation, combined with the ballasts, the transformers, if you will, in the fluorescent lighting, is causing the children to have ADHD and other diseases?
Yeah, you bet. That's a school disease too, and a lot of kids are sick in school on account of the fact that they have computers right next to them and all the other stuff. But nobody wants to pay attention to what's the real cause of the stuff, and it's basically electricity. In the old school I went to, we had pencils and inkwells, and 87, when I went to school, they didn't have all this junk. But now, I mean, schools are bad news. And the teachers have high cancer rates and a lot of other stuff, too.
But if you talk to teachers, they're proponents of these electronic gadgets. Some universities and colleges communicate with their students via the students' cell phones. So the students have their cell phones in their pockets all the time. Are you concerned about that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's an epidemic of brain cancers and other problems from people who walk around with cell phones on their head all the time. Go to an airport and people are just sitting there staring at their cell phones. They're not talking to each other anymore. And there's all sorts of problems that cell phones have caused. I mean, I've got a phone, but, you know, it's never on my body. And when I talk on it, it's on speakerphone, you know, and I use it. I might use it once a week.
I don't have a cell phone. I used to have a cell phone, and when I first got one, I thought, how did I ever live without it? And then after a while, I realized it was tracking my every movement, and it was making me sick and ill and dizzy, and I had headaches, and I dumped it years ago. And as soon as I did that, I thought, how did I ever live with it? How did I ever live with the cell phone?
I mean, people are addicted to the damn things, kids especially. And but what are you going to do? You know, this is progress. I'm glad I'm as old as I am. I'll be gone before anybody solves the problem.
Well, let's hope that is not the case. Dr. Milham, so let me tell you something that I did, and I'd like to hear your comments. We built our farmhouse around 2005, and I wired it and I plumbed it. And I decided that I would buy some copper dust, and I mixed since I wired it and I had standards. The cables in the wall are all run at a specific height. I have pictures of the rough framing and where the wires are. And so when we sheetrocked the whole house, I then mixed this copper dust with the primer paint, and I painted where the wires are. All the wires have been covered with paint with copper dust as a reflector. What do you think about that? I've never heard of anyone else doing that.
Well, I mean, copper dust is a conductor, so it'll pick up anything that's coming from there. So if you have it grounded, you know, if it hits the ground, then it's protecting you from what's coming out of the wires.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think about if you were...
Yeah, the metal, like coax cable has got it's got a sheath, a metal sheath, and that's grounded. So that keeps the signal pure.
Mm-hmm. So do you recommend if we had a choice of wiring our homes, having an external ground hammered into the earth at our breaker box or meter, would you recommend that we ground our wiring system or not?
Well, if you could do without it, fine, but you can't do it. It's part of code. You have to have a ground. But if the utilities got proper wiring from your house to the substation, then the ground is just going to help you if you get struck by lightning or something. Mm-hmm. That was the point of the ground, was for if their cables, fell during a storm, it wouldn't fry all the utilities in your house.
Right, and around our neck of the woods here in Missouri, I guess the new fun thing to do is to cut the ground wires coming from each power pole into the ground. So we don't have the grounds that we used to have because people would cut them off on the power poles and steal the heavy copper wire.
Yeah, I know. I watched the pole get set once down in California, and I was amazed at how far beneath the ground they go and how grounded they are. No, unfortunately, I use the ground wire on poles all the time to measure how much stuff is coming down, and unfortunately, it's a lot, and it's getting much. There's more of it all the time.
Would you like to address most of the cancer in firefighters is due to radio frequency radiation? Not.
Well, I wrote a paper on it, and
yes.
I'm sure that's what's going on. I mean, they're wired. I mean, they carry radios all the time, and we know when they're fighting a fire, they have to communicate because it might be dark and dirty, and I'm sure that's a big cause of the cancers in firefighters.
And what about policemen and women? They have radios on them too. They've got these push-to-talk microphones on their shoulder.
They walk around wired up. I think that's very, very unhealthy.
Right.
How
about radial tires? Steel-belted radial tires.
Well, they generate current, when you spin a magnet, which is what your tires are, because the wires pick up the Earth's magnetism, you could make clean tires with steel belts, but I wrote the companies that make the tires. They ignored me, of course, and I used to clean my tires, but I don't bother anymore as I've gotten old.
When you talk about making tires differently with steel belts, are you talking about having like a mesh rather than separate steel cables, or
No. They could just non-magnetic wire.
Oh, okay.
It'd be fine. They could make them sound the same.
Okay, so less ferrous, is that what you mean?
That's right.
Okay. Dr. Milham and I will be right back. Class medical doctor Sam Milham is with us today. There are two things I'd like to be able to cover in the last couple of minutes of our broadcast. One is, should we move to a rural setting, leave the urban setting, if we want to live longer and have less disease due to electromagnetic radiation? Dr. Milham, your thoughts on that?
I did that. I live in a rural, I live on Puget Sound, and I can control my exposures basically in-house. But when I lived in the city, I mean, I had the ground current problem because we were built on a slab, and there's just so much more electronics junk in the city, so you could just pick it up everywhere. You're getting, microwave exposure from cell towers, and everybody's, yeah, my answer is yes. I think rural is better. In fact, I've had an idea of getting a builder to build a clean community. You could probably build, say, a suburban community that's clean if you built it right, and like you did your house. Mm-hmm. My house is perfect. I mean, I've got no ground current at all, and very, very low. I measured once the smart meter was gone. The house is a perfect place to live. I'm on a landline. I don't use my cell phone, and so that's your first question. What's the other one?
The other question is, we used to have electronic devices, small electronic devices, that would have wall warts, and they had copper and windings on ferrous material transformers. But we've switched to something called a switching DC power supply, or something that is called a switch mode power supply.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the difference is in terms of health?
Well, the first are good, the second are bad. The switching power supplies put out dirty electricity. That's what your inverter is doing in your house if you have solar. And they transmit electricity from north to south in this country. They change it from AC to DC and then back to get the other end. The devices that do the changing put bad electricity, dirty electricity that runs down the line, and pipes and gas pipes blow up because they're in power lines with they run in a grid that has power lines and pipes. But anyway, that's another nasty problem of civilization. Yeah, rural is better for sure.
Okay. And you mentioned that when you built your house, you insulated electrically the flooring and the timbers and so forth from...
No, the house was 4 years old when I bought it. But
okay.
When we had an earthquake, and so I had to fix the foot supports. When I jacked the frame up to straighten up the supports, I just stuck a piece of roofing tile between the vertical and the concrete support.
There you go. Well thought out. Dr. Milham, any last minute or two comments of what we should do to protect ourselves?
I don't know. There's so much to do, and unfortunately, the government just isn't doing the job, and the utilities they're basically running wild.
Let me ask you this question then. Are smart meters causing disease?
Absolutely.
Do smart meters cause cancer?
Absolutely.
Are smart meters shortening our lives?
Absolutely. You know, and any EMF producers does that. I mean, your microwave's shortening your life too. Your microwave oven.
Why is it that I cannot get our electric utility to remove the smart meters? Why can I not do that? We had perfectly good working meters.
Money. It means that they don't have to hire people to come read the stupid things. Mm-hmm. And the utilities they've got terrible power. I mean, you're on the board of directors.
No, I want to be.
Well, get on and see if you can change it.
Well, they are so afraid that I will become a member of the board of directors of the electric co-op. They've said in front of thousands of people that they've got a good, smooth working board, and the last thing they need is Vincent Finelli disrupting the board. That's the last thing they need. Because
unfortunately, they're working for the board. They're not working for the population.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, we've got electronics in our house. Are you concerned about microwave ovens?
Well, yeah, I've got a shield on mine. I can get 90% of the stuff down, and when I put it on, I walk away from it.
Okay.
I just use it to heat my tea water.
Class, you've just heard medical doctor Sam Milham, and I suggest you consider going to his website, Sam Milham, MILHAM.com. He's a medical doctor, and he's got a master's degree in public health. Dr. Milham, thanks so much for being with us. I hope to do this again and again. You're a wealth of information. And thank you for waking up early for us today.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
You too.